It's time we talked about the art of summoning demons. I'm obviously talking about this book that I wrote and designed the cover for. And it's the first book that I officially completed, including several drafts, to the point of me feeling like I can't possibly do anything else to improve it unless I give it a few years and revisit it again. I've been debating for a little while making this video, even making this decision, but I think it's time I admit it. I've decided to shelve this book. Why has it taken me so long to make this decision and to make this video? Well, first of all, I think there's something that feels almost shameful about admitting that you want to shelve a book. And it's not because I think other people should feel ashamed of shelving their own books. It's just my own personal feelings about it. As someone who's quite prideful, I feel like it was a really difficult decision to make, and it made me feel like I was admitting defeat. But this begs the question, is shelving a book something that is permanent, or is it something that is temporary? So first, let's get into a quick recap about demons for anyone who hasn't been following this journey of mine for a long time, because clearly this is my oldest and first book that I've completed, even though I technically finished the last draft of it last year in 2025. Is it actually technically my first book? No, the first draft that I finished was a book in French, but this is the first draft that I finished and completed in English, and then also the first book that I actually revised to the point of feeling like it is fully completed. Like I've done the last draft, the last version of this book possible. Since finishing the first draft of The Art of Summoning Demons, I have also completed several of the first draft of other books. I have finished the first draft of An Office for Monsters, which is an urban fantasy set in London with a sort of supernatural investigation office similar to NCIS but for supernatural creatures. I've completed the first draft of A Space Princess, which I still have not officially renamed, which is a space opera sci-fi with sci-fi-esque supernatural powers, political problems, and a little bit of romance. I've completed in 2025 the first draft of Rules of Survival, my space horror novel inspired by the likes of Alien and Resident Evil, and I have also semi-completed, over 100k for it, but I've not finished writing the actual first draft, Knights of Death, which is my White Shoes urban fantasy romance with a witch and her 4 Knights of Death who come from hell. But regardless, the very first one was this baby. I started writing it in 2020, so it has officially been 6 years now, without having even a community around me. So this was a book, when I started writing it, I did not know anything at all about writing, about the writing community online. I didn't have friends on Discord, I didn't have you guys. When I first started writing it, I did not know anything that was going on. I didn't know what I was doing. Let me give you a brief elevator pitch for The Art of Summoning Demons. Olive is a freshman who, after burying her eccentric and estranged grandfather over the summer, yearns for normal experiences in college. But the morning after her first sorority party, she wakes up to find her roommate dead in her bed and occult symbols drawn in her blood, reminiscent of the strange engravings above her grandfather's crypt. This book has demons, ancient sororities hiding secret coven of witches at war with one another, 2 Mayweather death, and a hot detective determined to clear our main character's name. That's sort of my best elevator pitch I can give you for it. So how many drafts did I actually do for this book? I wrote the first draft in 2020. I then revised it into draft 2 by myself, so without having anyone else read it at the time. Then I had a third draft using some beta readers' feedback. This was early days for me finding beta readers, finding critique partners, and at the very beginning I was trying to find people who had lived in the vicinity of where I was basing my book, because I'm not American, I don't live in the States, and I wanted someone who could tell me this feels off, this feels right. After that third draft, this is when I became stubborn. I thought, I've worked enough on this, I'm done, I'm tired of it, this is the last version of this book, it's ready, I can try and query it. I really thought I was done with it, but then I had a change of heart, and I think the reason why is because I had learned how to write better from writing other drafts, and I had been been inside of a community of writers and I understood a lot more about the writing process at that point, and I was slowly coming to terms with the things that I needed to work on and where I needed to put more efforts in. But it did take me a while and I was stubborn. When I realized as well that the querying was not giving me any results, I decided to take another look at the first few chapters, and I thought, okay, what could be the problem here? And one of the main issues that I found was that my chapters were very short and it did not match what the expectations of the genre would be. So I decided to double them by simply mashing together 2 chapters every single time. And when I decided to make this work, I thought that was all I was going to do. But then I didn't realize at that point that my writing and my experience as an author had evolved so much that I was going to actually do a full round of really intensive revisions and rework a lot of passages and a lot of chapters. So draft 4 technically still revised alone with that decision made, even though I had the support of my critique partners that was talking about the issues I had encountered. It was what I was planning on working within the book, things like that, but it was still a alone revision. Then draft 5 is after that I got my last round of edits and comments from my critique partners and beta readers, so I gave it again to some people, and then I also gave the first 3 chapters to some people specifically just to have an impression of what an agent receiving the first 3 chapters would think of it, for instance, and just trying and figure out whether my pacing was good, whether there was enough intrigue at the beginning of the book, all of that. And that was the last version that necessitated any sort of developmental edits. And then at that point I did one last draft, so officially draft 6, which was the line edits, the very, very last line edits, getting rid of any filler and filter words, beautifying sentences as much as I could, making it sound less clunky in areas, making sure that everything was as good as I could make it, really. So technically this book went through 6 different rounds of drafting. Like I said, I had tried to query it early on and it was way too soon, but I did try to query it again after draft 6 was completed and I felt like this was the final version, and nothing came out of it. By nothing, I don't mean the experiences a lot of people are reading online of other people saying like, hey, I got this really lovely rejection explaining why. I've got this rejection by this person saying don't lose your spirit because this had this that was good, this had that was good. No, I had form rejection after form rejection after form rejection. That is all I received. And I do my work in terms of research. I do search for the right people to query. I'm not a complete idiot. I'm not a complete novice at it. I understand the system and I understand some of how it works. I get that you have to make sure the people you query would be genuinely interested in the genre you're writing it. So my only conclusion was that either this was really bad or this was not market ready. So this is part 2, the harsh reality. The harsh reality is that I can't sell this book. Not only did I never get any proper feedback from querying, so I don't know what's wrong with it, and it could just be that it's my first 3 chapters. I still think rereading them at times that although I think they're great and I love the book as it stands, they're slow and they don't immediately put you in the heart of what the main book's going to be about. We don't immediately get the sense of it having demons or witches or magic at all. We just get the sense of Olive as a main character and what she's looking for, and I feel like that was my main big change between some of the previous drafts in the last version. Is I wanted a better character development for Olive and I wanted to make sure that she felt more complete as a character. And the reason why is because I had it in mind that this would become a duology, and so I needed to make sure that whatever happened in the second book would make sense after reading the end of the first book, even if I was only trying to sell the first book. So I have some ideas for more character development and story arc for Olive. I have some ideas for what happens in the second part of the story, but the mystery itself within the first book is self-contained. So this could also be reduced down to 1 book. It doesn't have to be a duology. It would just be such a shame. And there are some mysteries that I would need to wrap up in a different manner in the first book if this were to become a singular opus. So following up from having absolutely no interest, no single request for a full manuscript at all from querying, I was left with some questions, which is why. That's the main question, is why? What's wrong with it? I did wonder, is it the genre? Is it that the genre currently is not really in? It's not selling? Is it not matching the expectations of the agents that I was sending the query to? Is it the query letter itself? And frankly, I don't think the query letter is at fault, but it did show me what could be the problem, which is that I found really difficult to write the elevator pitch and sort of the summary of what my book is about compared to other books I have written since then. Especially, it's the comparison that made me think there's an issue with the story itself, because I'm finding it hard to sell it, even just when it comes to trying and explain what the book is about to other people, even just when it is writing an elevator pitch sentence, all of the above. In comparison, when I try to tell people about rules of survival, I find it so easy to tell people what the book is about. And I have no struggle with even giving you a million different elevator pitch sentences for it. But The Art of Summoning Demons, I find it really hard, and that might be pinpointing what the problem is. Is it the first pages? So this was one of my other questions, are the first pages too slow, too boring, or simply they don't really give you enough hints that this is gonna have magic, witches, demons, all of the above? Because the first few pages are all about Olive going to her grandfather's funeral and then Olive starting university. And these are normal things to happen. I did try to include in the funeral scene a few elements that would give off some of the mystery and would give hints as to what's coming, but they're very subtle. They're not in your face, this is gonna have demons and witches and magic. And so I worry that it just was a little bit boring, or a little bit too slow-paced, or just not intriguing enough. Or is it the book itself? Does the book suck? Is it just not a good book to sell? It doesn't even have to mean that it sucks. It could also just mean that it's not currently a book that would sell on the market. It's just not for everyone. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have gone down the spiral. I have thought about all the different possibilities, none of them being very exciting or great. And I've tried to figure out if there's something wrong with the book or if there's something wrong with me as an author. So it's made it difficult, but I do still think I trust myself as an author now. I trust my craft now. And the reason why is probably because I have written so many other first drafts since then that I have really enjoyed rereading for myself. So I can't think of it that way. And I can't go down that road and think, well, if it's me, if I'm the problem, when will I get out of this issue? How can I ever sell a book? So I've changed the question. Instead of asking myself, is this wrong? Is this book wrong? I've decided to ask myself, is it wrong now? Is it about timing it to later? Is it when the market would be more open to this kind of story, when I would feel like there's a resurgence in those types of books? Or is it also about me as an author? Is it when I've established myself as an author in other ways by selling other books, whether it's traditional publishing or self-publishing, but once I have written other books that have sold one way or another, is that when the timing would be right for The Art of Summoning Demons? A little bit, let's say, like one of its very comp titles, which is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which apparently she had written before, I think, Six of Crows, but she sold Six of Crows first because that's what was selling, that's what got her her first deal, and then she got Ninth House out because she was an established author, and so she was trusted, her name was trusted, her writing was trusted, and Ninth House was a great success and it worked out great. So I'm not saying the exact same thing is going to happen to me, I'm not comparing myself to Leigh Bardugo, but is this the kind of thing I should hope for and want for The Art of Summoning Demons instead? I want to dive a tiny bit deeper into some of the issues that I have with selling this book. So the first one is the genre and the category. I'm not entirely sure on either, and that's part of the problem. Like I said, I find it difficult to give you an elevator pitch sentence about it, and I think part of the issue is that I find it hard to pinpoint the exact genre and the exact category. When we talk about category, we mean whether this is suited for a market for younger adults, so YA, or if it is adults, or if it sits in between, even though the traditional publishing market does not believe in that category, but you do find it in self-publishing spaces, new adult. I can't quite make up my mind about it, and one of the issues is that Olive is 19, she's starting university, and there are not a ton of books that are set in a university setting. I mean, they do exist, they are out there, but usually you find books that are a little bit more categorically organized in either young adult with high school or adult with you've got a job and you're living your life as an adult. There's not as many books I can find as good comps for this specific category that is sort of new adult, especially since the category of new adult has now come to mean something else a little bit, because when you think of it in terms of the self-publishing genre, very often when people say new adult, they just mean it's gonna have spice. They mean it's essentially, I wanted to get away with having a high schooler, you know, banging a 900-year-old fairy, but instead they're gonna be 19, just like Olive, and it's gonna have spice. That's not what this is. This is not a coming out of age story, so it doesn't quite feel grounded in the young adult genre. And Olive herself is quite a mature character because she's gone through some shit. She doesn't have a great relationship with her mom, and this kind of explains why she has a more mature vibe to her, which puts her a little bit more towards the new adult or adult genre. But she's also not an adult in the sense of she doesn't have a job. She's not over her teens, technically, she's 19. Which is another problem. I feel like people really hate that trope now. They hate the fact that we have very often a character who's just 19 because that feels a bit more comfortable than an 18-year-old. People have become fed up with this, that it's become too generic of a trope, so this could also be a problem. I also couldn't figure out for a long time whether this is paranormal, urban fantasy, or just fantasy, or anything else within the fantasy genre, any of the subcategories, and I find it really hard to figure out what it is exactly, because I kind of feel like it gives me the vibes of an urban fantasy without it being urban, is the problem. Because when people go in the paranormal category, it almost always means paranormal romance, and this is not the case. There is a romance aspect in the book, but it is not the main plot. It is a side plot, a subplot. It does have prominence, but not as much as the rest of the plot. The main plot is still a murder mystery at its core. So it's giving paranormal mystery with a side of romance, which again is a hard sell. I feel like when you mishmash a bunch of genres and you're not quite certain what to call it, people are having a hard time being like, yeah, I'm on board. It's also not a standalone, like I've established. That's another issue. Most people, when they're querying for their debut book, they need to query a standalone book. Very often people say like, oh, it's a standalone with potential for series, and that's the sentence you're supposed to say to explain that you've actually worked it as a series, but you could make it work as a standalone. That is the truth for this book. However, I see it very firmly as a duology, and I would love to write book 2, and I would love for it to continue in book 2. I think there's several aspects of the book that are not completed until I would have finished book 2. But yes, as a traditional publishing debut, that is rare to get a deal for, and it's very difficult, and it's very difficult to sell it that way. Another problem, as I've talked about, is potentially the beginning pages. The beginning pages are what is essential in your query package. It's what people read if they are happy enough with your query letter, and so they get to your first few pages. Not every agent requires the exact same amount of pages, but a lot of the UK-based agents, which I did try to query a little bit more after the fact, because I realized that a lot of my novels are more English-based, and this is pretty much the only one that is based in the US, and even then the beginning happens in London. But the UK agents in particular tend to ask for 3 chapters. It does vary, but that was sort of what I was focusing on. And so my first 3 chapters have changed a few times, and I'm still at a point where I'm not entirely 100% sure that they are currently right. Like I said, I still wonder now if they are too slow, and I think that's another reason why I feel like I have to shelve this book, is because I'm doubting everything. I'm still doubting my elevator pitch, I'm still doubting my query letter package with the genre and category and comp titles. I'm doubting everything, including the first few pages and whether they are good enough. And so this does not fill me with confidence that this book is right for the market at the moment, or that I can sell it. Then to move on to another part of this issue, I want to talk briefly about universal fantasies. Last year I read a few craft books, and one of the ones I read was 7-figure fiction, and it had this idea of butter, or universal fantasies, which the author called or nicknamed butter. Because they're essentially big tropes, as in not like singular small like only one bed, but big tropes that make up your book, that are the fantasies that people have that make it exciting and interesting and fun. So for instance, a great example is Cinderella. Who wouldn't want to suddenly be the center of attention of this really rich prince when you are currently living in poverty and being a servant? That's a universal fantasy trope. It's something that can appeal to a ton of people. And when I think of butter or the universal fantasies, I can think of so many very easily in my other books, and I can't think of many in this book. I'm not saying it doesn't have any, but I'm just finding a really hard time to figure out how I would sell this book with these. Because they require either some spoiler or a little bit more information that, you know, you lose interest the moment that I have to explain to you the joke's not funny anymore. And that's kind of the same here. And it sort of explains why I find this book difficult to sell. So these are all the issues and all the reasons why I think this book is not ready and it should currently, perhaps temporarily, be shelved. To me, all of these are indicators. They're telling me that there's something wrong, either with me or with the book. I'm not quite sure. But at the very least, they're telling me that I'm not trying with the right book at the right time. But that's not to say I'm not grateful for this book, because as I've told you, this book was the first one I wrote and finished in English, but it's also the first one that I completed to the point that I'm happy with the last version of it and I didn't want to change anything more about it. I think this book taught me so many things, and I want to be thankful for that aspect of it. It's the book that taught me every single thing that I have learned as an author. It taught me that I could finish a book, I could finish even just the first draft in another language. That's even better. It taught me that about myself. It also then taught me that I could move on from that and be able to finish so many other drafts, because there was a point where I was like, this is gonna take so long. If all I'm doing is just working on this, I'm gonna be so upset when it doesn't work. So I need to be working on other things. And that's when I started writing other drafts and finishing them as well, and realizing, oh my God, I don't have just the one story in me, I have multiple stories in me. It's also the book that taught me and gave me better readers and critique partners. Without this book, I would not have my beloved Hudson and Anna by my side, because obviously this is the book where I first started being like, hey, I have something to share. Do you guys also have something to share? And we can swap manuscripts, and would you mind reading this and tell me what you think? So this book taught me about community, and it taught me about critique partners and finding people you trust with your babies, finding people you know that are gonna be either shaking you when you need to be, or be gentle with you when you need to have someone who's gentle with you. And that to say as well, it taught me about the revision process in the first instance, because I don't think I would be where I'm at in my prose and in my writing style had I not gone through, even through that very last round of edits, when I went through all of the filler and filter words and beautified my sentences and everything. I feel like now when I write my first drafts, they're much better quality from the get-go. And also it taught me about character growth, because that was one of the main issues I had initially when I first started querying this book. Is Olive was a little bit of a two-dimensional character. She didn't have much depth. And the problem was that she was a little bit empty because I didn't put enough in her in terms of her past, background, her ghost, what she needed to fix, what she needed to overcome, her wants and needs. All of these things that are super, super important to develop an interesting character. I did not understand that until I went through my revisions rounds where I decided, okay, I need to develop this character more because she's gonna have a second book to go through. And even though I did not have great luck with it, it did teach me about the querying process. It taught me about how to make a query package, how to write a query letter, a synopsis, a summary of your book, an elevator pitch sentence of your book. It taught me about finding comp titles and what goes into the research for that, finding the right agents to query and the people who could be interested in the book that you've written, all of the above, which is such an intense process and it's so difficult to understand it that I am still really, really thankful that I went through it with this book, even though it failed through that process. So I think it's time for me to say thank you. Next, I want to shelve this book for now. I don't think the journey is over, and I think Olive might come back in book 2 at some point. But for right now, I just want to place my focus on other stories, on other books. So that's why I'm thankful for it, but I've decided to shelve it. And now I want to be able to talk about other stories. I hope that you guys enjoyed this really long let's chat and talk about this problem video, because this had been weighing on my heart for a little while and I needed to explain myself, even just to myself. So I feel like this video was very cathartic. Thank you for watching it. If you did enjoy it, leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel. I will see you guys in the next one.